So this week, sort of take a little different approach. Last week, I had some great feedback from people. I couldn't believe how many calls I got from the video I put out, so I'm appreciative of that. A lot of people responded to it. Had someone reach out regarding an interview, et cetera. So that was a great, awesome. Thank you. So I was talking to my son Sage, and he's helping me with some of the editing. He's in film school, and he'd asked me a question that I thought was sort of interesting, kind of an economic question, and it gave me an idea is to have him maybe ask me questions, just look up articles, social, political, economic, real estate, all that, and just ask me a random question and me answer it. And so we did that. And it was actually super interesting and also super funny at the end, just a question he threw out of the blue that was hilarious. So we're going to go that question by question. Sage will read the headline off and I'll respond to that. So here we go.
Hey, Dad. So I've put together a couple headlines from the past week of news that some you've seen, some you might not have seen, and I just want you to react with your most honest response to each of these, and let's talk about them a little bit. First up is an article from Forbes magazine published this week that says luxury home sales plummet 38%. The biggest decline on record driven by inflation and recession fears.
Yeah, I've seen this, different references to it. And the headlines are always dramatic. We have inflation and recession fears and all these words. That's what the media uses, those kind of words to kind of get our attention. And we understand it. It does. And first of all, we have to talk about the luxury market. So the luxury market has supposedly downturned. I don't know that it's downturned any more than anywhere else, really. And first we have to start, what is luxury? What is that price? Well, that price used to be, we'd say $1 million was a luxury home, but that's just not the case anymore. Now, there are some places across the country, certainly that is, certainly smaller towns. But as you move into certainly New York, California, Florida, Texas, larger cities now, $1 million is not. So, I own several rental properties. They're all worth over $1 million each. So that certainly would not be luxury, So where is that number? Based on the profile of my friends and clients that I deal with, I'd say the entry price in most thriving markets, I'd say $3 million. And I say that because the profile of the buyer tends to change around that number. Of course, there's exceptions to that in every case. But you have a lot more cash buyers, sort of over 3 million. You don't see a lot of people financing in general. And I'll talk about that too, because they do finance it in a way, but that's sort of the little secret. High net worth people, the way they borrow money is not like a traditional mortgage. So what has happened in the luxury market? Things have slowed down, but really there's a few drivers to that. Stock market performance is one. People are a little bit hesitant. Interest rates, and I'll tell you why in a minute, not mortgage rates. It's a little different. And then also people, they bought a home in the last few years during COVID. Sort of everyone bought a home that was going to, or a second home or a third home. And so people just sort of had enough. Now, the good part is there's still not a lot of inventory. So we're not seeing huge valuation problems, things like that. We're just not seeing a lot of velocity in trades, a lot of homes going back and forth. Okay. So let's talk about how high net worth individuals borrow money in a lot of cases. Let's say someone has $10 million in a stock and bond portfolio, whatever the case may be, at Merrill Lynch, right? So instead of going and trying to take out a traditional mortgage, first of all, that person may or may not even work, which is funny because them getting a mortgage is almost impossible, even though they may have 10 or $20 million in the bank, which is sort of funny and how backwards the banking industry is. But what they do instead, if you have $10 million here, I can go to Merrill Lynch within 24 hours. I can have $5 million in my hands with my $10 million pledged as collateral at a very low interest rate. Okay. And now they have no risk, clearly. They have $10 million worth of collateral. It can drop to $7 million and they're still more than covered. And there's different scenarios, but this is a kind of a generic example that's very real and in a structure that's typical. And during COVID, when rates were so low, I had friends and clients, they were borrowing money for less than 1%. So, high net worth individual goes in and says, hey, I want to borrow $5 million to buy this house. And they borrow it at 0.08. I mean, just interest rates that are just, it's almost zero, right? And then the house price, of course, the value goes up and you're really just, it's just free money. So that's very normal. Now that rate has clearly changed and really, let's just say gone from 1% to 4%, 1% to 5%. Okay, well, that's a big difference. Now it's still low because if high net worth individuals borrowing at 4, then the rest of us regular folks, we're borrowing at 6 or 7, whatever the case may be. And so there's still an advantage there. But it also makes people hesitant because at the same time, those stock portfolios are down, right? That $10 million probably did become $7 million over the last, 12 months. And so, there's a huge impact there. So people are sort of in a wait and see mode in any case. So I think we're just seeing less transactions. We don't know what the luxury market's doing because there's not a lot of trades. So that's sort of my answer to that. I'm going to track that a little more because over the next 12 months, the luxury market will give us a lot of signs because movements tend to happen there first that are very noticeable that bleed back down into the lower priced. I mean, anything under, 2 million, 1 million, and then on down, because if a $3 million home is reduced to 2.5 million, well, that $2.5 million home was just reduced to 2 million and it starts stacking down, not at the exact same ratio, but that's what happens. Next question.
Okay, the next one. 2022 was the worst year since 2008 for U.S. stock indexes, with the S&P dropping 27%.
Yeah, so this goes back to what I just said about people's stock portfolios being down. If you're down 30%, you're a little bit more hesitant. And what's really funny about this is go back to 2021. If you look at all the predictions for the S&P 500, which is, tracking the broadest part of the stock market people typically refer to, they project most Goldman Sachs and Merrill Lynch, all the smartest people in the world, right? They have these buildings filled with people that make predictions, and they predicted the market would end around 5,000 as their number. Well, that ended up at 3,900. I mean, we're talking such a huge miss. It's a little almost embarrassing, meaning we trust these people with our portfolios and things. They tell us we think this is going to happen. It's not even close. Now, none of us can do that. We just don't know. Now, the stranger part of that, all these predictions, there wasn't something unexpected last year. COVID had already happened. We knew inflation was coming. Anybody didn't see that was just completely oblivious to how economics work. So it was no surprise. But still, when you have the smartest people in the world, best educations, the most data at their fingertips, missing predictions by 20%, 25% to the down, the wrong side, right? We want to be surprised the other way, not down. It just says a lot. And it makes us even more cautious. Back to the luxury homes is, wow, I thought last year was going to be even or better. I'm down 30%. I need to really be cautious. So it's sort of interesting to see all these predictions in all the real estate. I don't know what's going to happen. I have ideas. Real estate moves slower. It's a little easier to project out, but you don't know for sure. None of us do. So I'm not a stock person. There are a lot of smarter people than me that handle that. I don't in any way do that. I would say talk to your broker, of course, and see what they're thinking about now that these things have transpired. Ask some prediction for this year. Let's see what they say. Employment's still good. Inflation seems to be tapering off. That's huge because that affects interest rates. But we're still bordering on a recession. Some numbers say that it already is, but employment this high, it's a little unusual scenario. So this year is going to be super, super interesting for, stocks and bonds, which is, much more liquid and changes day to day. You can wake up in your stock portfolio, a stock be down 20%. Now, real estate doesn't work that way, but so this year is going to be super interesting.
Now, Sam Bankman-Fried pleaded not guilty to all 8 criminal charges he is facing for investor fraud.
Oh, yeah, I love this story. So Sam, SBF, as they lovingly refer to him, another young genius out of Silicon Valley, Went to Stanford, I believe. I know his parents were teachers there. I need to look that fact up. Super smart guy, obviously. Crypto, we think of crypto sort of being a younger generation, and it is, tends to lean that way. Uh, and the last 2 years up until recently, everyone, you got these kids making, $1 million in owning Dogecoin, just really dumb things. And, this started from the idea of Bitcoin, which is actually super interesting. People call it digital gold. It still remains to be seen how that's going to play out over time. We can talk about that in more detail someday. I do think it's very interesting. But these other crypto that coins things, they just sort of made up. There's certainly no underlying value. The idea was interesting. It was think of in a video game, if I'm collecting coins as I'm playing, and that gives I can buy powers or weapons, whatever I do in video games, right? It's kind of the same thing. These coins started spawning up around this communities, and it was fun. And so if someone did the same thing, they could trade coins, and they just kind of, that was the value was between them. Well, then all of a sudden it expanded to where people started speculating with them, and Robinhood became a platform for basically kids in a lot of cases to go out and put money up and try to turn $1,000 into 20,000, and it worked for a while. Most of those are zero now. Not all, certainly, but everything's way down. Let's go back to FTX. So what happens here is Sam Bankman-Fried, he started a crypto exchange, and he took in billions of dollars in assets, right? Like 8 billion. He said, I want you as an investor. I mean, I would put money in, I want $1 million worth of Bitcoin. Okay, great. And it would be in my account. The problem was it wasn't in your account. He took the client's money, and then he had a separate company over here, a trading platform called Alameda. And this young girl ran it that, I mean, she looked like she was on like a Harry Potter movie. I mean, she said some of the most ridiculous things ever in interviews about how to manage risk. She had no idea how to manage risk.
Yeah, absolutely could pull it off without my math degree. Use very little math. Use a lot of elementary school math. Being comfortable with risk is very important. We tend not to have things like stop losses. I think those aren't necessarily a great risk management tool.
And it played out because they took the money without the client's knowledge, and apparently put it in this trading platform over here, borrowed money against that, tens of billions more, and then tried to trade it out in these highly leveraged trades in the crypto market, and it all got wiped out, because their equity got wiped out. They called all the loans due, and all of the client's money that's supposed to be here, right? This $8 billion is gone. Well, now these people say, well, just go ahead and send me my money back. And it's like, yeah, well, there is none. And just the entire system blew apart. This is not the only exchange. This is the most high profile. People are comparing it to Bernie Madoff and all these different things that have happened over the year, Enron. And it's certainly not like Enron, because Enron had, 10,000 employees that lost their job. This was, 25 guys living in the Bahamas with computers, and it was all embarrassing the way it was run. It was just kind of silly. They literally use QuickBooks to run their financial papers and documents. And, that's something a small business would use, right? And QuickBooks is a great software, but you don't run a multi-billion-dollar platform and organization using QuickBooks. There were no controls. The law firm that took over to file bankruptcy on their behalf said he'd never seen such, sort of silly governance inside of a company. They would submit expense reports over like chat, and somebody give the thumbs up or thumbs down to whether they're going to reimburse it. I mean, it's just ridiculous, right? So that platform is now blown up. He's been arrested. Other people are turning government's witness, trying to save themselves against him and senior people. We don't know how this is going to play out, but it's a super interesting story because the contagion effect is where it gets weird, because it not only blows up him and his clients, which is terrible, but lenders and their client. It has this contagion where it just spreads and spreads and spreads. You don't know how far it's going to go. And we've seen other crypto exchanges started kind of blowing up simultaneously here. One of the big ones that looks like it's now blowing up is the Winklevoss twins. They were the famous people on Facebook that claim that Mark Zuckerberg stole their idea. They got really heavy into crypto, and their exchange just got called by the SEC saying they were trading in illegal securities. That's a whole nother story and idea. But it's going to be really interesting because it's not just young kids, right? That money's gone and never coming back. But what happens next? How big is the contagion effect? Now you have investment banks on Wall Street who were sort of getting into crypto now saying, we're not sure. So my gut feeling is Bitcoin probably is the only one left standing, with maybe something called Ethereum that's a lot of payments take place with online. And people in the crypto community are sort of zealots about their coin and stuff. They would argue all this to death. And again, it's not something I care about. I think it's super interesting. But it'll be interesting to see what the contagion effect of all this is. It's pretty serious. This is billions and billions and billions of dollars across multiple companies and platforms. It's gone. All right, next question.
Okay, and I also wanted to talk about a headline we discussed earlier this week, and it's about Joe Rogan, who shared a post from another social media account from Neil Brennan about what a person who was born in 1900 and lived until 1985 experienced in their lifetime. Now, this was absolutely fascinating to talk about.
This is, I thought it was interesting that you had asked me about this. We talked about it just personally. Was Joe Rogan, everybody knows, a famous podcaster, and I'm holding this up because I want to look at it. He'd said that he posted something that someone else had posted, that imagine, we complain about how things are today. Things are terrible, this, that, and the other. And of course, things are never perfect, right? But the question is, is it really the worst time to be alive? Well, of course not, right? You got the middle age and things. But then he goes through this situation where he said, if you were born in 1900, here's what you experienced in your life if you lived to be 85 years old. And this is sort of eye-opening, right? So I'm going to just quickly hit them. So you're born in 1900. When you're 18, World War I starts. 22 million people killed. Okay. You're 29, the Great Depression starts. Okay, we know that. You're 39, World War II starts. Okay. 75 million people killed. 64, in your 50s, the Korean War. In your 60s, the Vietnam War. We're talking about it never stops. Every decade or so, these people were faced with some of the worst circumstances, right? Things that I'm 52, haven't really seen almost anything like what they saw every decade, right? Yeah, we had an economic downturn in 2008. It wasn't the Depression. There weren't bread lines. The entire economy of the world did not fall by 40%, or whatever the numbers were in the Depression. So, we haven't seen anything like that. And we haven't seen wars on a mass scale, world wars. Now, we had Desert Storm and things like that, more regional, which are terrible. And I went to military school, so I have a lot of friends that were very, very, very involved in that for a decade or more, still, in the military. And so, we haven't seen what those people saw. And I think, people refer to the, greatest generation, some of these older, people that really been through a lot, seen a lot, we knew it. That would be my grandparents around that age and time, saw most all those things, just really tough people, and sometimes we laugh at them for being outdated and all these things, but I think we need to give them a break, right? They saw a lot, they've been through a lot, and the world changed dramatically during that time, from no one had a television to everyone has three, right? So, it's hard to imagine what they saw, but we thought that was interesting. That's what Sage and I started talking about, was this. He'd asked me if I'd seen this. So it's interesting. I think we all need to get perspective, especially younger people, that haven't seen a lot, and we tend to complain, and we can all be more positive. I can, you can, everybody can. So just something to kind of keep in mind is, people have been through a lot, and maybe things aren't as bad as we like to think they are. All right, next.
Okay, and here's one last one for you. The New York Times posted an op-ed piece titled "Mate with Short People to Stop Climate Change."
What? Read that again?
Mate with short people to stop climate change.
Well, this is huge for me. Being vertically challenged at 5'9", this makes me look really good, like really desirable. Because if your mom was to leave me for a taller man, there's two things. One is it looks like I would have the prospect for another mate, and two is I can solve global warming at the same time. So this is big. So I'm excited to hear about this. These kind of headlines are hilarious, and it's sort of goofy, right? Every day we're looking at paper, reading stuff, and you come across these headlines and think, okay, wait a minute. Someone spent money and time researching, coming up with the idea that, if we mate with shorter people, that somehow it's going to solve kind of climate change. It's climate change one day, global warming the next, whatever. Come on. That's a hilarious headline. There's no doubt about it. Very funny. Like I said, it gives me hope for the future. Should I be on my own in my 80s, I can maybe find a mate. But yeah, super funny. I appreciate you reading these off and taking care of it. I really like doing this. It's fun. So if you stuck around to watch this far, it's awesome. Appreciate you. And we'll keep doing this. It's fun for me. Something we can learn some things, hopefully, and entertain ourselves a little bit at the same time. So anyway, I'll see you on the next go round.